There was a young girl named Ego whose parents died before she clocked 3 years old. Her elder brother Obum had to take up the responsibility of training all his sisters, including little Ego. Obum was a businessman, but his business didn't seem to be moving fine because he had so many responsibilities on his hands. He was taking care of his own family coupled with his younger sisters. So everything became so overwhelming for Obum that he could not afford the school fees of Ego. He decided to stop Ego from going to school so that he'll be able to concentrate on his own children. After Ego's primary school, she had to stop school and started hawking on the street as instructed by her brother's wife, Nkechi. But Ego, being a happy child, did everything with all joy, even though she wasn't as bright as other children. On her 18th birthday, Obum sat Ego down and had a very long talk with her inside his room. He has made a decision to send her to the city, to their auntie's house in the city of Lagos, where she can continue her life. Although Ego didn't like the idea because she was going to miss all her friends and everyone she had known for years, but she had no choice. Few weeks later, their auntie, Mrs. Nneka, came and carried Ego to the city of Lagos. Ego cried halfway through the journey because she didn't know the life that lied ahead of her in the new environment. When they got to Lagos, her auntie Nneka welcomed her properly and introduced her to all her children and neighbors. After some weeks, Auntie Nneka enrolled Ego into a vocational school where she would learn tailoring so that one day she would be financially free and useful to herself and family. As Ego started integrating herself into the Lagos life, she began to enjoy everything there. She made new friends. People knew that she was not very bright academically, but when she started sewing, she became so good and everyone loved her so well. One evening, as Ego was walking down the road to catch the next bus at the bus stop, a young man approached her and they got talking. Although she was skeptical about engaging in any conversation with him, but he was too persuasive. So she decided to talk to him, and as their conversation went well, they finally exchanged phone numbers and continued from there. This young man's name was Ikem. He was a driver to Ego's bus. After weeks of continuous talking and flirting, Ikem finally persuaded Ego to get into a relationship with him. And as naive as Ego was, she accepted him. When her colleagues found out that she and Ikem were in a relationship, they all warned her because they knew that Ikem had no good plans for her. But Ikem, being a smart young man, knew that Ego was a naive young girl that just came from the village to the city. So he wanted to make sure he gets Ego before her eyes opens like the other girls. But fortunately for him, Ego had long fallen in love with him and nobody could talk her out of the relationship with Ikem. Meanwhile, Ikem never loved her. He only wanted to use and dump her like he did to the other girls around. So one day, Auntie Nneka noticed that Ego had started dating someone. So she called her and gave her advice to focus on what she came to Lagos for and never allow any man deceive and take away her focus. Ego nodded in agreement, but she was still bent on loving Ikem. One day, Ikem persuaded her to follow him home. Initially, she refused, but Ikem, as persuasive as he was able to convince her, and she finally followed him home. As soon as they entered Ikem's apartment, he pounced on her like a hungry lion devouring his prey. Ego tried to struggle her way out, but Ikem overpowered her and had his way with her. Soon after that, Ego became pregnant and all her dreams shattered right before her eyes. Everyone was so disappointed in Ego, especially her auntie Nneka. Her auntie really wanted Ego to grow and become great in life, but all of that dashed to the ground. Her friends also blamed her for making the wrong decision and following Ikem against all their warnings. But deep down, Ego was excited about the pregnancy because she really loved Ikem, and Ikem on his own began to detest her. His plan wasn't for her to get pregnant. He even suggested she took it out, but she refused. So after a while, Ego's family wanted her to get married to the man that got her pregnant. But Ikem did not have the financial capacity to marry her at that time. Months later, after she had her first son, Ikem was able to save up some money to go ahead with the marriage rites. But Ikem felt so frustrated that he started beating and maltreating Ego at every chance he got. And he also started cheating on her, even with her knowledge, because he knew that she could not go anywhere no matter what he did to her. Ego would complain and complain, and all she got in return was more beating. Now she stopped sewing clothes because she was not able to finish her learning. She became so frustrated and started depending on family members to help her out. Soon after she had her first child, she became pregnant again for her second child. Her life became so miserable, and by this time, she was practically living in a dead marriage. At this point, she now realized that Ikem never really loved her from the beginning. He was only using her to fulfill his desires, but it was too late for her to turn back, so she thought. Sadly, with all these discoveries, Ego still didn't learn her lessons. She still took in again for her third child when her second child was barely 3 months old. Now, unfortunately for her, this third pregnancy came to her as a shock. On the day of delivery, she was blessed with triplets. She wept her eyes out and felt like giving up everything. Ikem was also very frustrated because he felt so trapped in this loveless and dead marriage. So while her family was there for her, she tried to pick up her pieces to get something else doing to be able to take care of her children, but everything she did didn't seem to work. Her husband Ikem became more hostile towards her because he thought that Ego came into his life to shatter it and make him reckless for life. So he resorted to drinking and womanizing. The more Ego complained about his behavior, the more he beat her. Few years later, Ikem became fed up with Ego in his life Then he sent her packing without her children. He threatened to kill her if she ever comes back for any of her children. She cried and begged to go with them, but Ikem refused. So Ego left dejected and without purpose. She started regretting all her actions over the years. If she had known, she would have focused on her skill and grown in it instead of following a man when she was not ready for life. After Ego and Ikem's separation, everyone thought that she would have learned her lessons, but Ego never did. She kept falling for every Tom, Dick, and Harry that came her way, and the same mistakes kept on replicating in her life. Even her family and friends tried to talk sense into her, but still, there was no change in Ego. As the years went by, Ego kept making different mistakes upon mistakes until it was too late to retrace her steps. Now, Ego was childless because she didn't even have the financial capacity and the right knowledge to fight for her children. As she got older, reality started dawning on her, and all that was left for her was deep regret. Ikem on his own end was suffering from a terminal disease, but no one was willing to help him because of his cruelty. Not even his children, because he was so cruel to them, so they abandoned him as they grew older and independent. So one fateful day, the five children gathered themselves together to go search for their mother. After contacting some family members, they were able to locate their mother Ego. She cried bitterly as she saw all her children grown up. But thankfully, she was able to reunite with her children, and from then onward, she started advising her children and younger girls around her to never make the same mistakes she made during her younger age. She taught them the need to always focus on their life, career, and education while they had the opportunity, so that their lives will not end up just like hers. So, this is the end of today's story. This story teaches us about the power of focus. Anything that is shiny is not always gold. So let's always educate younger people around us to always stay focused in order to achieve greatness. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story today. Kindly like this video, share to your loved ones, and also subscribe to my channel for more interesting stories. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.